If something happens in your story, then it happens. If you lie to your reader, you lost the reader's trust, and he or she will put your book down, or maybe incinerate it. So, what is writing? Writing, it's about ideas. Maybe it's a character, maybe it's a place, maybe it's the whole plot which springs into your mind. Then you put those ideas on paper, so you have communication from the writer to the reader. The writer writes something down, and the reader will read it and knows what the writer means. Then conveying a message is also writing. Maybe you want to write something in order to make a difference, to teach the reader something, as is the case with lots of pony episodes. And lastly, writing is of course fun and creative. You're creating your very own characters, your very own world. You're basically God. Then we have the elements of a story. First of all is grammar, which will make sure that you place the words in the sentence correctly. Second of all, you have spelling, which will make sure that the reader knows what you're talking about by not making spelling mistakes. Third is layout, which means dividing your story in chunks, in paragraphs, so the reader can easily read it and won't bump his nose against the wall of text. Then we have the different parts. First of all is narrative, which, I'm sorry, I missed one. I missed style. Style is the way you write, so your creative voice. The parts, we have narrative, which moves the story from A to B. It is the writer telling what happens in the story. We have dialogue, which is used to flesh out your characters and see what their reaction is to other characters and to the world, what they think about it. Then we have the characters, which are the persons who are going to do stuff, which will cause stuff, which will cause stuff, which will cause stuff, which will make up your story. Then we have plot. Plot is the thing, the main idea your story is about. It's like a summary of one sentence. For example, Big Macintosh wants to collect more animals after the Smarty Pants incident, but has to make sure no one finds out. Just a random idea. And then there's description. Description will make sure that the reader knows what he or she is dealing with a place, with a certain character, or whatnot. So grammar first. Yay, grammar. Yes, Rainbow Dash, really. So grammar, what English has is tenses. There are different tenses in English, and if you master the tenses, then you can write things as they happen in present tense. You can write things that happened before, like flashbacks or histories, or you can write things which will happen in the future, like expectations or flash forwards. I also have some punctuation here, the comma, the semicolon, the colon, the dash, the hyphen, and the period. So I'm not going to explain how exactly you have to use them, because that would take me a whole hour, but I wrote it down in my book, Elikas' Wonderful Writing Book, and I will talk more about that during the Shameless self-promotion. So spelling and vocabulary. It's all about reading a lot. Read a lot of English books and look up words you're not familiar with. You can use with a dictionary, which is the best option, but you can also use Google Translate. And I know Google Translate has a bad reputation. Don't use it for sentences, but Google Translate actually has an option. You can press more synonyms, or you can press more translations. So that way you can learn new synonyms, new words, which also mean the same thing. Hi, Caroline. Then another great website to use is context.reverso.net. If you put a word in there, it will automatically place it into a sentence. So that way you will always figure out the right translation using the context. Then we have terminology. It might be fun to put some terminology in your book. For example, I wrote a story, An Eastern Equestrian Heartswarming, and in that story there's a miner pony. Of course I did some research on how mining works and found some words which I could use, which the character could use, so it makes it more believable. But don't use too much terminology, because not every reader is an expert on mining, of course. Layout. So layout, it's about paragraphing. You have many different words, you have ideas, but you separate them into paragraphs in order to make it easy for the reader to read. We have double-spaced, that's the above example. We have single-spaced, which is the below example. And as you can see, I used indents here as well to distinguish between the different paragraphs. Then there's also the weak scene break and the strong scene break. The weak scene break is the space between paragraphs, which is used when a different character starts speaking, when a different character takes action, when you describe the thoughts of a different character. The strong scene break, that's this thing, it's used when you change scenes drastically. So if you change perspective or if you change the time in which you write. Strong interruption means strong scene break. You can remember that. So we have the viewpoints, of course. First person, second person, and third person. So everyone, what is this? No? First. It's the first, because we see the world through Fluttershy's eyes right now. So that's the first person. We have this one. Third person, yes, we see all the ponies, but we ourselves aren't a character. The camera is tilted slightly upwards as well. And this one, well, that's obvious, that's second person. I couldn't find a good example, so I threw in a meme. Bam! When in doubt, throw a meme. So first person, which means that the story is told by the main character. And if you want to do that, you have to consider if you want to trade your creative voice with your character. Because the character might tell the story in a much more different way than you would like to tell it. So maybe the character curses a lot. Of course you can't write with a neat English accent. You have to curse a lot as well. You have to trade your voice. Then make sure that the character is rounded and interesting, because we're constantly in this one character's head. So you better make it interesting or it becomes boring. Third person, he, she, or it, which means that the writer himself or herself will tell the story to the reader. Second person is pretty rare. It means that the reader himself is the main character of the story. It's very wacky, very weird. I haven't tried it out myself. I do have plans to try it out myself, because I'm curious how it works. Viewpoints. So I've written a few examples. You don't really have to read them now, because I'm going to read them out loud, and then you can read with me. So these are 3 paragraphs which will transition between all the viewpoints. So pay close attention and see if you can recognize it. There I stood, on the top of the mountain. Below me, a valley of infinite green stretched out into the distance. Above me, there was nothing but empty sky, already glowing red with the setting sun. I was ready to begin. Sunburst concentrated, feeling the magical energy surge through his body. It was time to test his theory. For years he had been studying magic, and he has got many answers to his many questions. But the only question that he just couldn't answer was why his name was Sunburst. Today, these things would finally connect. Sunburst knew it. You focus and focus on the lowering sun, ordering it to rise it up again. Stop! Stop! You cry out. But it is in vain. When at last fatigue envelops you, you let your magic slip and sit down in exhaustion. No rising the sun today, but you're sure to try it again tomorrow. Powerful writing. These are all things, all tricks, tips and tricks, which literary devices, which you can use to make your story powerful, to make it leave a lasting impression on your reader. First of all, we have the similes. Similes are a comparison between 2 things, using the words like or as. For example, as strong as Big Macintosh, or greedy like a rampaging spike. Then we also have metaphors, which is the same thing, but the words like or as are omitted. For example, you're a whirlpool of inspiration, or GalaCon is gold. Then we have idioms, which are proverbs in English. For example, it's raining cats and dogs. Now these things are usually very cheesy and very old-fashioned, so you can change them and spice them up with a little My Little Pony in it. For example, not barking up the wrong tree, but bucking up the wrong tree. Not don't cry over spilled milk, or don't cry over spilled cider. That's something Rainbow Dash would say. She would cry about that. Then we have the changes of verbal tense, which means that you change the perspective of a story. You can do that in a dream, for example. Then you write the story in third person, but once you get to the dream, bam! You put a strong scene break in there, and then you start with a different perspective. It might work. I've seen it. Next is epistolary interludes. That sounds very complicated, but it really isn't. Because epistolary interludes are documents which are inserted into the story, like newspaper articles, or diary entries, or logbooks. Fallout Equestria has tons of those things, and they explain the backstory. Then you have florid prose, which means using the most outstanding, the most commendable, the most gratifying words you can find. But you should mainly write as you speak, because then writing will be easier for you, and reading will be easier for the reader. There's such power in simple words, there really are. Then we have stream of consciousness and internal dialogue, including an exclusive example. Stream of consciousness means describing the thoughts of a character, and internal dialogue means that the character has direct thoughts, so as if he or she is speaking to him or herself. Here we go. Silently, Sweetie Belle wondered what it would be like to be as famous as Sapphire Shores. She could already see herself standing on stage, filling every pony's heart with the sound of her amazing voice. Shall I be that famous one day? So the last bit, shall I be that famous one day, is internal dialogue, direct thoughts. Active and passive voice. So with active voice, the subject of a sentence does something. With passive voice, something is done to the subject. Now, it is a good idea to use active voice as much as you can, because it is the way we naturally speak. We have a subject, then we have an action. For example, I've got the difference above. The scooter was driven by Scootaloo to school. Doesn't really make sense, no. But the school, so Scootaloo drove to school on her scooter. That's much more direct, much more clear. It's active voice. But that doesn't mean that passive voice is always bad, because passive voice can be used to put emphasis on the object instead of the subject. It was a present given to me from Big Macintosh, cheerily said. So here we putting the focus on the present instead of the giver. You can also use passive voice when it is not important who did what. The Crystal Empire was freed from Sombra years ago. Or you can use passive voice when a general fact is stated. It's a synthesizer, Tavy. It's made to make noise. Plus best cringe face ever. Show, don't tell. When you gain writing experience, there is one thing you will always hear about. Some things that will be repeated, that will be said to you dozens and dozens and dozens of times, which is show, don't tell. Telling means literally telling what happens, while showing means showing the reaction of the characters or the reaction of the environment. And then the reader can come to a conclusion about what is happening, him or herself. It's very powerful. For example, the above example is telling. Octavia was furious upon hearing about it. You have been throwing a rave in our house. So as you can see, we're telling that Octavia is furious. So you can do that, but better, Octavia stamped her hooves on the ground like an angry percussion ensemble. She locked Final's eyes in her own as she said, "You have been throwing a rave in our house?" So as you can see, she stamped her hooves and she locked Final's eyes in her own. So we are not giving away that she's angry, but the reader will conclude, oh, stamping her hooves, oh, locking eyes, she must be angry. Then we have this example. Telling isn't always bad. You can use a combination of telling and showing. Final Scratch became startled. She backed away slowly, inching closer and closer back to the door from whence she came. With an unimaginable effort, Final didn't forget to breathe. She was almost outside. But you can also use telling when with standard pleasantries or with things that aren't really important to the story, or when traveling. For days they walked, trotting from town to town, from city to city, until they finally found what they were looking for. New land for a brand new apple orchard. So if you would show that your characters arrive in every single city and they don't find what they're looking for, then why do you show that? It's not really necessary. And the story would be long and very boring then. Pacing and flow. It's all about speed. Pacing means the speed with which your narrative unfolds. So for example, one paragraph may cover a day, or a week, or a year, or 2,000,000 years. And flow means pacing on the level of sentence structure, so how long or short your sentences are. Nothing goes without an example, of course. We have an example of fast pacing right now. One day, Big Macintosh decided to do something crazy, just for once. He bought another one. Then this ritual started repeating itself over and over again, until, at the end of the month, he had a whole collection of stuffed animals, neatly arranged on some shelves in his bedroom, where no pony would see them. No pony would ever find out. So as we can see, this whole paragraph covers a month of collecting, so it's pretty fast pacing. Then we have this piece of writing. It's roughly the same amount of sentences, the same amount of words, but watch closely. Big Macintosh's hoof hesitated on the doorknob of the toy store. Should he go in? Wouldn't it be extremely strange for a grown stallion to buy a stuffed animal for himself? Yes. Yes, it would. But he wanted another one, so badly, just so that Smarty Pants wouldn't feel so alone. After a deep breath and a swallow, Big Mac opened the door. So as we can see, same amount of sentences, same amounts of words, but we're describing maybe a few seconds, a minute. Then we have flow, of course. This is an example of a laid-back flow. Big Macintosh put his newest addition to the family on the shelf and stood back to watch his ever-growing collection with eyes brimming with enthusiasm. Big Macintosh looked almost in trance as he let his gaze glide over all of the stuffed animals, over the flamingos and the chickadees, the otters and the beavers, the elks and the deer. And yes, I had to add elks in there. So this piece has a very relaxed, laid-back feeling, flow, because the sentences are all very long and multi-claused. But take a look at this. This is an abrupt flow, until a knock on the door interrupted his musings. No pony could be there. This couldn't happen. Big Mac's eyes went wide. He wanted to say something, to stop whoever it was at the other side of the door, but he clamped shut. Slowly, the slit of the door became wider. Already Big Mac could see a brown hat. This went wrong. This went very, very wrong. So as you can see, these sentences are all very short and snappy and fast, and it gives the writing a very anxious feeling. This kind of flow is used in suspense, or in action scenes, or in scary scenes. Dialogue, yay! So dialogue is used to flesh out your characters, to show what their opinion is on the world or on the other characters. So each character has its own voice. An easy way to explain that, Rarity talks much differently than Applejack, of course, because they have different voices, different ways of speaking. Then it is important to show who is speaking all the time. You can use that by describing an action, then put the dialogue after that, or you can use set tags. He said, she said, it said, the elk said. All right. As you can see, I've got 3 examples. Applebloom nodded to the beat. Secretly, I always wanted to be a DJ. Are you sure about that? Final Scratch said. Nodding once again, Applebloom said, of course, I'm already good at spinning plates. If only it were that easy. Characters. Characters are the figures who will play a role in your story. They will do things which will set other things in motion, and then your story will write itself using the rule of cause and effect. Every character you make has a sliver of your own soul in it. That means that the character is a mix of your characteristics, characteristics you have seen in other people, and just fantasy. So you should mix, match, and make it relatable. Make a character very realistic, so the reader can say, oh, he's very curious. I'm very curious too. Oh, wow. I can relate to this character. And then your reader wants to know more about it, because he or she looks like him or her. You have round and flat characters. Round characters are characters which are very rounded, complete, interesting, which have many different blocks of the character's backpack. They're very complex, they will develop themselves too. While flat characters are characters which won't really develop much and they only make a small appearance, like background ponies, for example, if you don't count the Slice of Life episode. I wasn't done yet. A character's backpack, everything a round character needs in order to exist on your paper and be interesting. First of all, strengths, which are things the character has and can use to overcome obstacles and help each other overcome these obstacles. You have weaknesses, which makes the character vulnerable, but also believable. And then the character has to turn the weaknesses into strengths in order to overcome the enemy or the natural thing, your enemy. Let's keep it with enemy. Then a character has a history or backstory which has shaped the character into who he or she is now. I mean, I was born and I was raised and I didn't just appear out of thin air. I'm a product of where I come from and I'm a product with whom I have interacted. So for example, a backstory, family can be a backstory, as we can see over there. There are personality traits, which are quirks that make you special. For example, a love for dubstep, or for classical music, or being very curious, or being aggressive, things like that. There's also ideals and beliefs, and these things run very deep. Ideas and beliefs are like morals. For example, being a natural pacifist, not wanting to hurt anybody else. Then we have bonds. Bonds with places, with people, with family, with Sweet Apple Acres. Or, of course, bonds with a beautiful mare friend. Last thing I want to talk about is Mary Sue's and Gary Stu's. So Mary Sue's are characters which are too perfect. They are characters, they have only strengths, they don't have weaknesses, and they can overcome every single obstacle by snapping their fingers, which is not possible because they have hooves. Taking that aside, it's easy to transform your Mary Sue character, your unbelievable, perfect character, into a more realistic character by adding some flaws. All right, so this is the part which puts the creative in Elkia's creative writing panel. Right now we're going to build a character of our own, using the knowledge we have gathered through my voice. First of all, we have strengths. Our character must have strengths which they use to overcome obstacles. Has anybody got a nice idea? What strengths, mister?
The main character can stretch out his or her tongue and grab things.
Ooh, a chameleon tongue. I like that, yes. Chameleon tongue, great. I like it. I like it. It could be changeling or something. Mister over here.
I think it's pretty good that the weakness is the flip side of the strength. So why not let the body can talk better? It's the tongue stretch.
That's nice, yeah. So it might be mute.
Or a speech impediment. Like
What's that?
He slurs when speaking because he's got a big tongue.
Oh yes, it slithers and slits and precious. All right, we have the history or backstory. So is there a family or friends or did they die or what happened that shaped the character into who he or she is now? Mister? He fell into a pot of toxic. Do I smell a Fallout Equestria hint here? All right. Some more history or backstory, something original. Make it crazy. We're all crazy here, aren't we? Mister in the back. I'm sorry, I'm going to walk to you. I'm sorry? One. Oh, yeah. All right, I like this. So apparently our character fell into the vat of poison together with someone else. And because he fell into the poison, one character has the ability of a chameleon tongue and the other has an ability of a tail. But we're actually creating one character here, so I would rather like choose one option. All right. Some more history or backstory. Mister?
Grew up in same-sex boarding school.
Grew up in the same-sex boarding school. Wow. Oh yes, of course. It must be very weird to have a chameleon tongue and grow up at the same-sex boarding school where everything has to be perfect, like in our town. In our town, in our town. Ideals and beliefs, which are morals, moral goals. What does the character think is not done or is done? Mr. over there. They want what?
He's highly manipulative and aims at stealing the princess's crown.
Oh, okay, all right. So the character is aimed at stealing the princess's crown because he or she is very manipulative. I like it, I like it. So that is more of a mission than a belief. But it's all right. Oh, you got an idea? Ah, okay. He believes in evil. That's good. Our character is not a protagonist, but an antagonist. Okay, and bonds. I'm sorry?
You copied the personality traits up to the history and backstory.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. That's all right. I'll fix it later. History. Yeah, that's all right. Doesn't matter. We have the bonds. Bonds with family, with friends, with whatever. Mr. Screenwriter. Oh yes, a best friend. The two misfits. A partner in crime, I'd say. Do we have some more ideas? Mr. over there in the back?
He has a crush, but she's afraid of lung cancer.
Ah, okay. Oh, that's really sad. We have a tragic hero here. He's doomed to fail. Oh. Spike. Oh, don't say that. Spike is awesome. I don't know German. What does this say? Ich weiß nicht. Yeah, antagonist. So making an antagonist goes very much the same as making a normal character. But the most important thing is backstory and motivation. So there is always a reason why people do things. And there is also a reason why your character became evil. Maybe something traumatic happened to him in his childhood. Of course, it's nice to give the antagonist great strengths. But don't forget to give him or her some weaknesses as well. Those weaknesses can then be exploited by the main character to defeat the antagonist. We have questions at the end. Is it very urgent? No? All right. Yeah, so weaknesses. And of course they have bonds. They have minions maybe. They have a secret base in a cave, behind a waterfall, behind a firefall, behind a cliff, behind whatever. So this is our antagonist. So now we're making a character which will make the life of our main character very sour and sad and bad. We have strengths. What can our antagonist do, Mr.?
He's known. Wait, he is known for it. I wanted to say that it's the wrong position.
Yeah, it's the antagonist now.
They're not good, but we made our protagonist was a hero, was a villain.
That's right, yeah. We have some very interesting characters here. They're both kind of evil, so maybe a confrontation might turn into a collaboration.
Maybe the best friend.
Maybe the best friend, yeah, perhaps. Mr. over here.
He's super muscular, and when he flexes, it it makes the protagonist really ashamed of his own body.
Ah, okay. We have something very awkward here. This keyboard is weird. Where's the I? There. It's a German keyboard. It's different than the Dutch one. Weaknesses. So what are things that our antagonist has which can be exploited by the protagonist? Mr. over there.
He's very self-conscious about his teeth, which is why he never smiles.
He never smiles because he's self-conscious about his teeth. Right. So maybe Pinkie Pie can pop up from nowhere and teach him how to smile. Bam! Then you've got a confrontation, you've got a climax, and your antagonist may turn out to be not so evil as we think. Mr. over there.
So he's been pretending to be the best friend of our protagonist, but during that he kind of developed sympathy for him, and now he's maybe more hesitant to fight him.
Yeah, so there might be hesitation because they are kind of friends. I like it. This is very, the relationship, which is very, the line is very blurred, very gray. We're in a gray area here. Yeah. All right. Then we have backstory and motivation. Why did our character become evil? Mr. Beard over there.
Yeah, maybe a family member of the antagonist was killed by a lizard man or something, and that's why the chameleon form.
Oh, yes. Of course.
Reminds him.
Yes, then he wants to be friends with our character, but can't because he has an internal struggle. He hates, he despises everyone with the chameleon tongue. So I don't have one, so I'm safe. Where's the Z on this? There. All right. Then we have a very strong motivation now. So we're moving on to bonds. Does he have minions or a base or some place where he belongs? Yes, mister?
I would suggest the Royal Guard because of the role of our protagonist.
I see. So he's a member of the Royal Guard then. All right. Oh, okay. That's funny. Yeah, this is new for me. We're going for description. So description, it's about describing, for example, an environment or an object or a character. A clear description will make sure that the reader knows what he or she is dealing with. You should open all your senses: sight, sound, smell, feeling, taste, atmosphere, and emotion, of course. Open all your senses and pick out a few nice details. Don't describe like everything, but just a few nice details which speak to you the most. And by the way, it would be a hell of a job to describe this. So, we have an example again. Rows and rows of bookshelves lined the room on either side, with yet more bookshelves crammed in between. Light filtered the healthy green of a forest, streamed through the windows into the vast hall. The bookshelves shimmered and sparkled before my eyes, and I was in doubt about what was shinier, the shelves on which they lay, or the hidden knowledge bundled in the countless books themselves. I was at a loss for words, because all I wanted to do was read and read and read forever. So, as you can guess, the character who says this is Elikas, of course. So we focus on sight in this example because we see the bookshelves, we see the green light, but we also use emotion because the main character, Elikas, feels something as he watches all of those books. He wants to read and read forever. Don't eat, don't sleep, just read. World building. So, we're going to build a world. When you're writing a fan fiction, it's not really necessary because we already know so much about the Questia, but there are also gaps which you can fill in yourself to make it more original. The more you know about your world, the more realistic it will be. You should know your world from the inside and the outside, as if you live there yourself. But don't show everything. Just as with description, there are many details, many things, but only use the ones which matter, which speak to you the most. What are things you can think about? You can think about the geography, the lay of the land, are there mountains, rivers, bogs, boulders. We have the history or the backstory, which is everything that happened before your story began. So everything that happened in your world before the story began. So for example, a war or a famine or a revolution. Then we have society and culture, which has everything to do with the people or ponies living in your settlements. Are there differences between rich and small? What is the government like? Is it the Lunar Republic or the Celestial Monarchy? I don't know, make something up. Empire, thank you very much. Adjust the details according to importance. If a settlement is very important and many things happen in there, you should write a lot of details. But if your characters are just passing through your settlement, you don't need all the details, of course. So now it's time to make our world. So I want to try and make something that is much unlike Equestria, so something unique. We have geography here. Anybody can do it? Yes, mister? I'm sorry? The mines of Yakistan. All right. So we have ourselves a very specific place. Very well. So this is very specific. So we have mountains probably, we have caves, we have sinkholes, we have underground lakes, underground rivers, stalactites, stalagmites, we have many different things. We're going for the history. Mister, tell me.
There's lots of monsters in the mines, because monsters are sentient in Equestria, they live there because they're sick of the yaks. Because they're sick of the yaks.
Oh, okay. So there are monsters living in this cave because they're scared of the yaks. Ah, that's right. We need some more history. We need to flesh out this location even more. Mister over there. For the horns and stuff. For the... Sorry? The helmet. Okay. I see, yes. So they're mining the minerals they use to decorate themselves with, but they're constantly in a fight with the monsters who are in that cave. We're kind of in a circle now. The monsters hate them because they mine, the yaks hate them because they mine. All right. Then we have society and culture. So this might seem a bit abundant, but we can make this work. As a writer, it's your job to make stuff work. Society, we have monsters in the cave. Maybe the monsters are intelligent. They can talk, they can speak, they have a king or a leader or anything. So what's the society, what's the culture of these monsters? Mister over there.
They identify each other by smell.
Sorry, one more time. They identify each other by smell. All right. That might get gross. I like it. All right. Another thing. We need to flesh this out more. Mademoiselle. Ah, they have 3 leaders and they smell the prettiest. All right, one more thing. Mister?
The miners and the monsters have established some kind of black market.
Ah, a kind of black market, yes. I mean, for money, they will stop their truce, perhaps. They will stop their war. So as you can see, we have created our own world or our own cave. But the cave could still be a world when it's like a network of underground caves and things like that. I've been in those. It's fun. Fun and dusty. Suspense. Suspense is very important in your story. It is usually the climax, close to the ending, and you put the fate of your protagonist in doubt. So with suspense, it's important to create obstacles, like the antagonist, in order to make the life of your protagonist very sour. You have to get engagement, which means you have to make sure that the reader cares about your protagonist. The reader must read that the protagonist is having a very hard time, and you want that the reader wants to help the protagonist, but of course that's not possible because it's a fictional character. Writers are evil. All right, so get this engagement. Right now, you guys are engaged with me because you want to know what I have to say. It should be the same for your book. Your reader the reader must want to know more. They must want to read your book and don't put it down. Be clear in your storytelling, so we are sure about what's happening. The reader can follow every movement. But also leave tiny plot holes. So if you keep some dangers hidden, and then bam, they suddenly show themselves, then the shock will be bigger for the reader. And sometimes that's what you want, to shock your reader. The breaking point. Breaking point, very important. The breaking point of your character is the worst time he has ever had. Maybe the protagonist even dies. Something happens that is almost too much for the protagonist to handle. You have to stretch him or her to the breaking point. Maybe even literally. Yeah, I'm evil, I know. Then be unpredictable. Maybe some sudden thing happens that helps the protagonist or the antagonist. In my novel Animal Friends, I used lightning so Twilight Sparkle could blind the eye of Sauron. So that's something unpredictable that helps the protagonist. Slow down time by describing more details. If you describe more details, then the time will be very, very slow. As it's the same when I explained the flow to you guys, that you use, pace. It's the same when I explained pacing to you guys, that you use many words to slow down the time. So in one long paragraph, only 2 seconds pass. Then we also have the suspense arc. Suspense is always an arc. It starts off peacefully, then the anticipation builds. We have the breaking point here, and then it goes down again to the ending of your book. If you write a short story, there's usually just one suspense arc. It's close to the ending, because close to the ending is almost your most climactic moment. But if you're writing a long novel, then you have multiple suspense arcs. You have suspense, relief, suspense, relief, suspense, relief. So I've got an example here of suspense. I'm going to read it for you guys, and then we're going to see if how I incorporated the tips I just told you into suspense. There we go. The two fillies rushed through the forest, teeth gritted, wings flapping, giving it all they had. The sound of rolling wheels over dead leaves almost drowned out the panting breaths of the two little fillies. No pony was taking the lead. Scootaloo's friends were long out of earshot. There was no judge to see if the scooter race would be fair. And that was exactly what Sisselbold had been waiting for. "You ain't gonna win this, chicken," Sisselbold said, after a quick backwards glance. "That clubhouse is mine." Between heavy breaths, Scootaloo threw her rival a vicious stare. "The clubhouse belongs to the Cutie Mark Crusaders, and I'm not gonna let you take it." "Too bad." And with that, Sisselbold's hind hoof jabbed at Scootaloo in a lightning-fast motion. The blow struck not Scootaloo, but the handlebar of her scooter. The thing flew away, together with Scootaloo, who couldn't control his scooter any longer. Catch you at the finish, Scooter loser. Sizzlebolt's voice rang out from far ahead. Scootaloo sailed through the air, then dove into a roll which made her head swim. Finally, she crashed to a halt, her roll stopped by a little bush. Scootaloo needed a minute to catch her bearings, but of course, she didn't have a minute. Her legs felt bruised and battered. Scootaloo tried to stand up, but a pain like an electric shock spread to her body. With a grunt, she fell down again. She looked up, but Sizzlebolt was already around the next corner. A shock went through her heart. Now Scootaloo wouldn't only lose the race, she would also lose the clubhouse. But she couldn't give up. She had to win. For her friends, for her clubhouse, for the Cutie Mark Crusaders. And besides, Scootaloo didn't need legs to ride a sled. She shuffled over to her scooter, now nothing more than a plank with wheels. Scootaloo braced herself and then slid onto the makeshift sled. Yes, this might do the trick. So, let's see what we have here. I underscored this part. We have teeth gritted, wings flapping, and the sound of rolling wheels. Those are details you describe to slow down the time and make it last longer. In reality, it's only a few seconds, but you use many words to make it last longer. That was exactly what Sizzlebolt had been waiting for. That's a little foreshadowing. You know Sizzlebolt is going to do something, but you don't know what. Then, Sizzlebolt's hind hoof jabbed at Scootaloo in a lightning-fast motion. So that's an unexpected action. Scootaloo tried to stand up, but a pain like an electric shock spread through her body. With a grunt, she fell down again. So as you can see, this is the breaking point. Scootaloo is in pain, both physically and mentally. She might even lose the race. This is the hardest time for her. Now Scootaloo wouldn't only lose the race, she would also lose the clubhouse. This is, of course, the stakes. We want to know what she is doing it for her life, for a box of butterscotches. Butterscotches are good. No, she's doing it for the clubhouse. Plot. So a plot, it's about a problem. Your world is in peace, but then bam, something happens, something strange, which needs to be solved. For example, will he get the girl? Will he live through this adventure? Will Rainbow Dash ever wear pink? I don't know. Yeah, but you can also, if you want to get inspiration, pose the what if question. What if Scootaloo would fly? What if Pinkie Pie would become sad and depressed? What if Rainbow Dash couldn't fly anymore? Needless to say, your story should be interesting and original, but there's more to these words than meets the eye. If you have being interesting is more important than being original. If you are not really original, but very interesting, then the reader still wants to know what happens next. I read a story, it's called University Days. It's about Final and Octavia going to university, and then they fall in love, etc., etc. It's your typical high school story. It's from this viewpoint, it's not really original, but I kept reading and reading and reading and reading because it was so interesting. So many things happened, and I wanted to know how it would end. So, as you can see, originality isn't everything. Being interesting is what is important. Then we also have the backstory or history, which is everything that happened before your story takes place. And you should bring your backstory in with grace. You can tell it to your reader through direct narration, by writing a prologue. You can do it by dialogue. Or you can use epistolary interludes. And if you remembered what it was, those were documents inserted in the story. You can do that to explain the backstory. So, I made a plot outline. It's a very ridiculous idea, so please don't laugh, please don't. As you can see, I have a dramatic question, and you think about the dramatic question, you keep it in your mind, and then you think up scenes with which you can show your plotline best. So as you can see, I've divided it into a beginning, a middle, and an ending, and I've also come to a theme for this story. Scene 1. Fluttershy's friends see her bear wrestling and want her to compete. Scene 2. Her first match. She loses because she is afraid to hurt some pony. Scene 3. Fluttershy confesses to her friends. Scene 4. During the next fight, Iron Will shows up and tells her she could fake it to make the crowd happy. Iron Will convinces her opponent to play alone. Then we have the ending, Scene 5. Fluttershy wins the competition, but confesses to the crowd that she faked it. But the crowd doesn't care, they know already. They love Fluttershy. So Fluttershy continues to fight and wins the title. So please don't actually write this story, it's rubbish. But I said no laughing. But as you can see, we have a very nice outline with which we can use to write the story. Now, an outline isn't carved in stone. The outline is not a train track, it's a path. Maybe you want to divert from your outline because some opportunity shows up, something that you think is interesting and worth describing. So, yes, an outline is good. No, you don't always have to follow it. When I wrote my work, right now I'm working on Two Worlds Divided. It's a post-apocalyptic thriller, and this was a very scary story for me. Not because it is like a scary story with ghosts and stuff, but it was a scary story because I didn't know how it would end. I started writing because I had a beginning in my head, I had a very vague middle, and I had no ending. So it was very risky for me to start, but don't worry everyone, I'm all right, I figured out the ending. So the hero's journey. The hero's journey is like a template which you can use to write your story. These are all things that can happen to your main character. So if you follow this formula, you will get a pretty nice story. Maybe a bit standard, but as I said, originality isn't everything. So we have the status quo. Everything is good in the world you've created. Then we have the call, in which something happens, something is wrong, and the hero must take the call to adventure and answer it. Then we have assistance, because the hero is just a greenhorn, inexperienced. He or she needs a mentor, preferably an old man with a beard, to teach him some things. We have the departure. The hero leaves everything he knows behind and enters unknown paths. The trials. This is where the suspense begins to build. There are a couple of things that happen which pose obstacles to the dramatic question and to your opponent. We have the approach. Your protagonist is thinking out of the box to find creative solutions to the problems. The crisis. This is the breaking point of your character. The character will be stretched to its limits. It's almost too much to handle. Maybe he even dies, but gets reborn, like Gandalf. Yeah, it's true, right? Oh, by the way, you get bonus points if you guess who the ponies on the cog are. You would make me very happy if you would know. We have the treasure. Because the hero defeated the antagonist, he or she receives something valuable. We have the result. Something happens because the hero has defeated the antagonist. This can be positive or negative. For example, slaying a warlord, but then a new one takes its place. We have the return. The hero returns from the special world to the ordinary world, the world he knows and cares about. We have new life. The protagonist has grown stronger through all of the trials he or she has faced. Resolution. Your plot is going to end. You tie up all the loose ends and you end your story. You end your story again at the top with status quo. Everything is once again returned to harmony. So, time for our hero's journey. We got the characters, we got a place, and now we're going to build the story, basically a bit of the outline. So first of all, we have the status quo with the cave. What is the status quo to a cave? Yes? Is a slave in the cave? Ah, okay, all right. So the protagonist was enslaved by the monsters. So that could be... where do we place this? Trials. Slavery is quite a trial, of course. The status quo, we can just fill it in. That is the cave with the black market, a shaky piece, I'd say. Right, then we have the call. Something happens that will make the protagonist want to go adventure and make it better. Mister?
One young yak sneaks in and gives him the key so he can find a way to escape.
Aha, that's good out-of-the-box thinking. So we're having a yak who gives him the keys. And of course, now the protagonist has to run for his life. Does he get any assistance from anyone? 5 minutes? Okay. He doesn't get any assistance. Forget about that. We're running out of time. Bam! All right. The approach. So the main character has to escape from this dungeon. Yeah, I saw it. Thank you. Perfect. Yeah. Crisis treasure result. Right. I think we'll just skip this part because I have some more very important things to say. All right, editing. I usually, editing, yay. It's the point where Twilight says, smile and wave. You know, she's not very happy about it. Editing is my least favorite part of the writing process, but it's very necessary. I usually make 3 drafts. The first draft is the story as it comes into my head. The second draft, I look it over, I correct misspellings, I add clarifying phrases, I add or delete paragraphs, sometimes whole chapters. Sometimes I just write a whole chapter. Then I wait 6 weeks to be able to look at it with a fresh set of eyes. And after those 6 weeks, I look at it again, fix it again, and then I'll send it to my friends who will read it and who will give me constructive criticism on the novel. Now it's time for a shameless self-promotion. This was the important thing I talked about. So, writing, as in other forms of art, it's important to get noticed. Now, I am not really a marketer because I think your work should speak for itself. It doesn't mean slapping your story in everyone's face and forcing them to read. It's about standing out in the crowd, being interesting, maybe even original. If you want to check out my work, you can find it on FimFiction, Elkia Deerling. Just type it in and you'll find me. And on Equestria Daily, I published Elkia's wonderful writing book. It's under tutorials. That has all the grammar bits in it. So if you are a grammar nerd like me, it's your heaven. So I have given you everything you need in order to create your own legends. So the only thing you need now is some inspiration. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions? Not really? No? All right, that's a shame. If you still want to ask me a question, just tackle me, you know? I mean, I'm at the con all day, so tackle me. But not literally, please. I have very fragile bones. Oh, and thank you everyone for coming. And let me know how your story will work out. I'm excited to see it.